day. The year was 2008, and my grandfather and I were in search of a nice, simple first-person shooter like Doom or Quake or even Duke Nukem 3D. Because by 2008, there were so many games that had come out that were modern-day first-person shooters, Call-of-Duties and all the rest. Really, we wanted something that was like the old days. And well, one day we were at the half-price bookstore and we just so happened to come across a game called Painkiller. Now, neither one of us had ever heard of this game before, and looking back on the box, it looked pretty good. It looked like a nice, simple, give me a shotgun, give me a monster, and let's just have some fun. And well, we took it home and were not disappointed in the slightest. The game was initially released in 2004 and was developed by the Polish developer People Can Fly Software. The game was, and still is, touted as a classic first-person shooter in the same vein as Doom and Quake. However, like with many of these throwback-type games, it actually does its own thing. Quake and Doom were all about getting to an exit. Painkiller, on the other hand, is all about fighting in arenas. And really, that's all you do in this game, and it actually works quite well. It makes for a frantic and fast-paced first-person shooter experience. The enemies come in a number of different varieties, and you're not just fighting the same guys in different colored shirts over and over again. Hell, you even get to fight fucking Scorpion in an opera house. And yes, I did just say that. Did I mention this game is absolutely awesome? Because if I didn't, this game is fucking awesome! Another departure from Doom and Quake is the fact that the enemies in this game primarily use melee attacks. And these attacks can indeed be quite powerful if they actually land a blow upon you. The projectile attacks also work quite differently from Quake and Doom as well, as they're usually thrown projectiles and not fired projectiles. So really, the whole dynamic is very, very different from Doom and Quake. But despite all that, really, when it comes to first-person shooter gameplay, you cannot get much more pure than this. The only thing this game is actually missing is the weapons being right in the center of the screen rather than off to the side. When you kill certain enemies, you can collect their souls, and if you collect enough souls, what you can do is you can turn into a demon form. This just sort of makes the screen go a little weird, and it gives you the ability to one-shot most enemies. However, most of the bloody time, I turn into the demon form when there's either A, no enemies, or B, one enemy. You then have the power-ups in the form of tarot cards, and you can unlock these by completing some manner of hidden objective. And these power-ups will give you damage resistance boosts and things of that nature. But, as you would expect from an early 2000s game, it's not that easy to actually use them. Rather, you have to collect gold that is scattered around a level to activate the cards once you have unlocked them. Personally, though, I never found myself actually using them all that much. The weapons for the game are excellent as you would expect, and like any good classic-style FPS, you of course have two firing modes per weapon. The game starts you off with the titular Painkiller, which is a circular saw on a stick. This firing mode is quite good for clearing out weak enemies, and its alternate fire is useful as well, as it's a long-range projectile that has a laser beam attached to it. And really, the Painkiller is a weapon that is useful pretty much throughout the game. You then get the venerable shotgun. It's a double barrel and does good damage against just about everything. Its alternate fire is not necessarily what you would expect though. It's a freeze shot, because when you think shotguns, the first alternate fire that comes to mind is Mr. Freeze's freeze gun. A freeze is coming indeed. The shotgun is useful in just about every situation, and the secondary mode is actually good as well, as it allows you to one-shot weak enemies, and it quickly wears down the health of stronger enemies. Really, I found myself sticking with the shotgun for a good amount of the game, as it had plentiful ammo and was sufficiently strong for even the strongest of enemies. And then of course we have the steak launcher, and no, we're not talking about New York strip steaks, we're talking about wooden steaks, ladies and gentlemen. This weapon is quite interesting mainly because it makes use of the Havoc physics engine. This game was one of the early adopters of the Havoc physics engine, and the Havoc physics look okay in this game. This game is very much in love with the concept of ragdoll physics, and this gun was primarily designed to show off said ragdoll physics, and it works fairly well, and it's a very satisfying weapon to use. And the ragdoll physics themselves have aged rather gracefully along with the rest of this game. As for the rest of the weapons, I really don't want to spoil them, as they really just get better from here. As this is a classical styled FPS, there are numerous boss fights to be found throughout the game. But there is one particular boss fight, and I use the biggest air quotes imaginable, that really annoys me. You have this guy waddle around and you shoot him a couple times and he doesn't die. He moves so slow that he's not really a threat, so you keep shooting him and he doesn't fucking die. If you pay close attention, you will go over to this flaming pit. And you think, oh, I just lure him over here and then somehow he will drop into it. Well, you can spend all the bloody time you want and he will never fall in there. Turns out you have to shoot these wooden beams. The beams fall on the ledge of this pit and he then walks into them and he explodes. Don't ask me how this makes sense. It just does, cause video games. Now before anyone decries me for spoilers, keep in mind, I just saved you a considerable amount of time trying to figure out how to kill this annoying bastard. Moving right along from that annoying cretin, we now move on to the actual boss fights. And the boss fights for this game are absolutely excellent and are completely and totally classic. The bosses are generally Xbox huge, and they are very fun to fight, as they have different behavioral patterns and things of that nature, and really, you don't have to actually complete a puzzle to actually kill these things, nor do you have to complete a QTE to kill these things either. Rather, like with the Cyber Demon of old, you shoot them until they die. The graphics have of course aged a little bit as time has gone on, but in all reality, they have aged remarkably well since 2004. And yes, I am aware of the massive graphical glitch that this particular boss causes, and I have absolutely no idea how to fix it. Not only does this glitch show up in the original disc version, but it also shows up on the GOG version as well. But thankfully, it's not a game-breaking glitch in the slightest. Really, this game is a lot more stable than you would actually think. Far more stable than many modern-day EA games. And really, it's quite amazing just how well this game runs, despite the fact that this is really an indie game in many respects. The level textures and 3D models look really good, despite being from 2004. And everything in the game is richly detailed. The weapons still hold up to this day, and the level design, ladies and gentlemen, is still amazing as well, mainly because they are huge and wide open, and they are not blocked off by numerous invisible walls. And there are, of course, numerous secrets to find throughout. And when I say the levels are huge, I am not exaggerating. The normal movement speed is fast, but if you really want to get your ass moving, use the bunny hop. Yes, Painkiller brings back this classic Quake way of moving, and it really is quite enjoyable to use it, as it really does fly right in the face of modern gaming and all of its pretensions to realism. As I always say, if you want realism, play fucking Arma. As for the music, it is thankfully some epic heavy metal. For those about to rock, we salute you. The sounds for the weapons and enemies are decent enough. The shotgun sounds pretty good, but not quite as powerful as it should be. And as you play through the game, you'll find that many of the sounds sound awfully familiar, as the developers do use some royalty-free sounds here and there. And really, that is no big deal, as they chose to spend the money where it was really needed instead of blowing it all on Kevin Spacey Satan. As for the voice acting in the game, it's passable. None of the performances are really amazing, but they do indeed get the job done. And surprisingly enough for a game like this, the game actually has a fairly interesting story. The story is thus: while driving to dinner, you and your wife get killed by getting into a wreck with a big truck. She goes to heaven, and since this game is not Happiness Simulator 2004, you of course get to go to the absolutely amazing place of Purgatory. You are then approached by this guy, who gives you the opportunity to go to heaven if you kill several of Satan's generals. The plot for the game is really quite clever. You always seem to need to contrive some reason for either hell to come into the physical universe or for you to go there, so why not just have your character already be dead and have to go fight hell to go to heaven? Now in all reality, there's a few logical issues here and there, but none are big enough to actually make me want to complain about them. You have to look at it like this: this game could have just gone with, you go to hell, kill enemy. Instead, they actually wove a fairly entertaining plot on top of that, and it is nice to have some good context for all the shooting and all the fighting that you do. Now, this is a game I highly recommend, and thankfully you can pick this game up a lot easier than you can The Suffering, as Painkiller is on both Steam and GOG. And there's even a sequel/remake kind of thing called Painkiller Hell and Damnation that has modern-day graphics if you need such things. Ultimately, I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good sin and good requiem, whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this review of Painkiller, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue to bring you these great video game reviews.